Assalamu alaikum everyone. So today we are gonna be doing business structure. It's a new chapter and we are gonna starting with the main way we can categorize businesses, what type of business structures exist. First we are gonna be talking about the basic sectors of business, that are primary sector, secondary sector and tertiary sector, which you all must be aware with, but there's not much about that in our course, but we still need to have a basic information about what these sectors are. So let's begin. Business can be divided into three main sectors based on the services or products that they provide. Generally, primary sector is related to firms which are engaged in extraction, engaged with raw materials basically to extract natural resources from the environment so that they can be further processed or used by other firms, or even directly sold. Like fishing, sometimes fish are directly sold, sometimes they are sent to another factory somewhere where they are salted or and canned and exported. So prime sector examples are basically farming, fishing, oil extraction and all other industries that extract natural resources so that they can be used and processed by other firms. Now secondary sector is somewhere between primary sector and tertiary sector, as in that it manufactures raw materials, it takes what primary sector gives, and sometimes it direct gives the finished product to the tertiary sector, or maybe sometimes it directly sells it to the final consumer. So second sector basically consists of businesses that manufacture raw materials into finished or semi-finished goods which can be further processed. For example, it can cooking, construction, cloth marketing, car manufacturer, all these are part of secondary sector. Now tertiary sector is the last sector, the biggest sector that is, because as we go down the sector, the price, you can say the price gets higher and you will find more skilled people in tertiary sector as opposed to primary sector. So tertiary sector generally involves businesses that sell services that are intangible goods instead of end products. Generally, for example, retailing, transport, insurance, banking, hotels, tourism and telecommunications, all these are examples of tertiary sector. So let's move on now. Now businesses can also be classified into public or private sectors. That is the main focus of this chapter, to classify businesses into public sector, private sector, and then further into what are the categories of businesses in private sector, different types of legal structures. So let's talk about public sector, private sector. Let's first talk about private sector. Businesses owned and controlled by an individual or groups of individuals, not owned by the government. As the word private suggests that it's private, so like there's no government intervention, it's all up to the individuals or groups of individuals which can own the business. They control it, they run it, they don't have to answer to anyone, not to government, because the government is not own it. All the ownership and control lies within the individuals or groups of individuals who own the business. So in private sector also there are two types of businesses. There's incorporated business and there's unincorporated business. Now what's the basic difference? The basic difference is that incorporated business have separate legal identity, they have continuity, and they have limited liability, whereas unincorporated business do not have separate legal identity and continuity. Also they have unlimited liability. Over here we have limited liability, but over here we have unlimited liability. So what does these three terms mean? Separate legal identity, continuity and limited liability. So let's talk about that. Separate legal identity means recognition, acceptance and personification of the business in the eyes of law. The owner and business are treated as separate entities, in simple words. So it's like you have to treat the business and the owner as separate person, not like if the owner has done some wrong thing, the business is also involved in it. No. And it's not like if a business has made some loss, the owner also suffers the loss. No, they are both as separate entities, so they should be treated as separate entities. That's the basic idea behind separate legal identity. So in incorporated businesses, businesses have separate legal identity because there's a name for them, there's a trademark, there's a logo, so it differentiates them from the owner. But in unincorporated business, there's no such thing, because the owner's name is involved in the business. The owner's name is what the business is. And let's check about continuity then. Continuity means existence in case of death or change of partners and owners of the business. Now, if the owner dies, will the business still continue its operations or not? If it continues its operations, then that means has continuity. That is, it is part of incorporated business. If the partners change, or if the death of the owner, if the owner dies, then the business does not continue, the business is finished, then that's unincorporated business. Why is that? Because the owner is what was associated with the business. They both were not treated as separate legal identity in unincorporated business, as we said earlier. So that's why if the owner dies, that means the business also dies. But in an incorporated business, as they both are treated separately, so the existence in case of death or change of partners, there is the business will still continue its operations. The partners might change, someone else will take over, but the business will still continue. Now, the last thing, limited liability. Limited liability means the only liability or potential loss a shareholder or owner has is the amount invested in the business. That is simply their personal property is not involved. In case a business makes a loss, the owner does not have to use his own funds to cover up for the loss of the business. The only loss that they will have is the amount that they have invested in the business, not their personal belongings. But in case of unincorporated business, since the business and the owner are same people, they are associated with the same name, so any loss that is made by the business, owner has to pay for it, with and their personal property can also get involved. So that's these are the risks involved with unincorporated business. Incorporated business have these benefits. So that's about the private sector, incorporated business, unincorporated business. We are going to be talking about the separate legal structures separately in another video. For now, we are just focusing on what is private sector and what is public sector. Now, public sector is the opposite of private sector. As you can tell, it's more about, it has, as the name suggests, public. There is government intervention. Government decides most of the things. So a business owned and controlled by the state to provide a social benefit or provide products and benefits, services that might not be adequately provided by the private sector, such as electricity, public transportation, etc. In some countries, there are certain things that are in control of public sector, while in some other countries, it might even be sold by the private sector. As for example, in Pakistan, electricity is only provided by public sector, K Electric. It isn't provided by any private limited companies. But in other countries, there's a competition. There are businesses in private sector for providing electricity as well. So that's something else. And that's about the public sector. Now I've given more details about public sector because there's not much more than this. That's all in our course for public sector. In private sector, however, we are going to be talking about much more other businesses as well, all the separate legal structures that exist in private sector. So that's for some other video. For now, let's talk more in detail about public sector. The main objective, what's the main objective of public sector? It's not profit, because since there's government involved, they want to give products that are not provided by other businesses, or other businesses might charge too high prices. So since they want, the main purpose of the public sector is to provide utilities to common people, to the government, to the local public. So the main objective is the welfare of state. It is the welfare of the state. Due to a strategic value of utility, countries decide to keep control of the utility in the public sector to guarantee the provision to all at an affordable price. As we discussed earlier, that it might be you need to provide at, some people might not be able to afford it, so you need to keep the price maintained. You need to maintain the prices and all. It is also cheaper and easier to secure the necessary capital finance. And that's the benefit of being a public sector business, that you can easily get the finance required for the business. But the other thing that comes with it is that subsidies by the government and the lack of profit objectives lead to inefficiencies. Because if government provides you with the funds, government gives you anything that you want, if you face a loss, government will cover that up for you. So there's generally inefficiency. Because of that, there's a lack of motivation, a lack of strictness. So because of that, there are a lot of inefficiencies. There's also greater government intervention, because it's the whole idea behind the public sector, that the government is funding it, government is giving you some incentives, government wants to control that, the utility, government wants to provide for the state, the main objective, the welfare of the state, so they keep everything in their own control, the pricing and all, and everything like that. Now, share and shareholder, these are two terms that we'll be discussing a lot. The shareholders basically in limited companies, so let's just talk about a brief definition of what they are. Share means a certificate confirming part ownership of a company and entitling the shareholder owner to dividends and certain shareholder rights. What this means is that if a person has a share, that means they have part ownership of the business, and they will get some dividends from that, the profit that the business make, and they have certain rights as well. So shareholder is that person who has this share. Whichever person has this share means that they have certain ownership rights, they have some part ownership, and they will get some profit from from the profit that the business makes. That's the whole idea behind shareholder. These are the basic definitions that the book and some notes have given, so I've put that down over here. All these definitions are good for the 2 to 3 marks that come in exams. Limited liability often comes in exams for 2 marks or 3 marks, so this definition is more than enough. It's better to take screenshots of this if you want. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Allah Hafiz.